of their participation in the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on the camera. It is committee policy that members will remain muted when not recognized, just like turning your microphone on and off during a hearing in person. This is out of courtesy to all members on this committee and so that background noise does not interfere with another member who is recognized to speak. When you are recognized, you will need to unmute your microphone and pause for a couple seconds before speaking so that we are able to hear everything that you say. If you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand function, unmute microphone, and ask to be recognized. In order to ensure that everything members say is captured on the live stream of this hearing, I ask that members pause for 2 to 3 seconds before beginning to speak. If you wish to have a document inserted into the record, please ask for unanimous consent and have your staff email the document to veteransaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. It will be uploaded to the committee document repository. Please keep in mind that you will need to refresh the repository page as it does not automatically update. Without objection, members will be recognized in order of seniority for questioning witnesses. This makes it easier for me to make sure all members participating have an opportunity to be recognized. Does any member have any questions about the conduct of this hearing with members participating remotely? Hearing none, I will now start with opening remarks and recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning and welcome to this morning's virtual hearing. Today we will be conducting the first legislative hearing of the 117th Congress for the Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs Subcommittee. I would like to start by welcoming the subcommittee's newest member, Mr. Jake Sgli, a fellow veteran also with a 20-year naval career and also a Naval Academy graduate. He's joining the committee after his election to Congress, and welcome, Congressman Sgli. Caring for survivors of military sexual trauma and the families of those who die in service from service-connected injuries or illnesses is one of our nation's highest callings. Today, we'll discuss a package of bills that are working to uphold those responsibilities. We have several committee members with bills on the agenda, as well as I look forward to hearing their comments. As we look to improve the care we provide to service members, veterans, and their families, the legislation in today's hearing serves as a vehicle to improve the delivery of benefits to MST survivors, families of those who die in service from injuries or illness related to that service, and increasing accesses to services. The trio of bills that Representative Van, Representative Delgado, and I will speak on today will improve the provision of services and benefits to those who have survived military sexual trauma by providing peer support during the claims process, improving coordination between the VHA and VBA when a veteran is filing or receiving a decision or determination on their MST claim, and increasing autonomy and ensuring the claims process is more sensitive to the needs of trauma survivors. In addition to the legislation we will discuss today, we will dive deeper into the quality of the claims process for the MST survivors in an upcoming joint health and DAMA MST oversight hearing. We also want to spotlight and improve upon the survivors' independence programs within the VA today. Can I pause and ask all members who are not speaking to make sure that you are muted? Thank you. We also want to spotlight and improve upon the survivors' independence programs within the VA today. Working to better provide benefits to the families of those who died in service from service-connected conditions, Representative Hayes' bill, the Caring for Our Survivors Act of 2021, would provide a long overdue increase in DIC rates for surviving families, finally bringing it on par with that other federal survivors' families receive, as well as an innovative way to better care for veterans rated 100% totally and permanently disabled, who die before they have reached the 10-year window required for families to receive this benefit. Additionally, the Justice for ALS Veterans Act of 2021 provides additional support to the families of veterans who die from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. In addition to legislation aimed at improving the process of applying benefits and caring for families of the fallen, we want to ensure we are increasing access to benefits. Representative Levin's bill, HR 4601, the Commitment to Veteran Support and Outreach Act, supports the committee's commitment to reducing veteran suicide by increasing access to county and state veteran service officers, especially for veterans in rural areas and underserved populations. Additionally, Representative Connolly's bill, the Veteran Fraud Reimbursement Act, and Representative Trone's Restoring Benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act would improve the repayment to a veteran on their estate should fraud occur when a veteran has been defrauded by a fiduciary. The Mark O'Brien VA Clothing Allowance Improvement Act also increases access to benefits by reducing the time and effort spent applying for benefit each year on a condition that does not require reapplication annually. I look forward to the testimony that we will hear today for all the bills that are on the agenda and hope it will provide the committee with valuable information to improve upon the legislation before us and provide needed services to our nation's veterans and their survivors. With that, I would like to recognize Ranking Member Nels for 5 minutes for any opening remarks that he wishes to make. Representative Nels, can you check
Sure.
your end? Thank you.
Chair Luria, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
I have a
recognized for 5
hearing
minutes.
disability and I can't hear you very well. I don't know if there's other members that are having a difficult time with this, but anyway, listen, I want to thank you, Chair Luria, and thank all of you for being here with us today. And first, I'd like to welcome a fellow Texan, Representative Jake Elzy, to the DAMA Subcommittee. Representative Elzy served in the Navy for 20 years as a fighter pilot, 20 years, deploying 9 times and completing 7 combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. And his experience in the military will certainly be an asset to this subcommittee. And I look forward to working with him to improve the benefits and services VA provides to our veterans. Turning back to the hearing, the bills before us today are intended to tackle important issues facing veterans and their loved ones. And one of these bills is H.R. 3793, the Supporting Families of the Fallen Act, which was sponsored by Representative Roy. The VA Servicemen's Group Life Insurance, or Sgli program, or the Veterans Group Life Insurance, which is Vgli program, were created to meet the unique needs of service members, veterans, and their families. And oftentimes, families use this benefit to make ends meet, as well as cover funeral costs and other end-of-life expenses. H.R. 3793 would give VA the flexibility to raise the maximum coverage rate of the Sgli and Vgli program from $400,000 to $500,000. However, this change would occur if the Secretary determines that the program would remain financially stable. And the increase, honestly, is long overdue. Congress last raised the maximum coverage amount for these programs in 2005. And according to VA, the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, which is used to calculate the annual Veterans Cost of Living Adjustment for compensation benefits, has increased by about 30%. Yes, 30% since 2005. H.R. 3793 would prevent inflation from eroding the value of this benefit by increasing the maximum rate by almost 30%, or $100,000. I appreciate my colleagues on this committee, Representative Roy, for his efforts to provide additional financial security to the families of veterans and service members. Another bill intended to support the families of veterans who have passed is H.R. 2827, which was introduced by Representative Waltz. Our government has the responsibility to ensure that the families of service members and veterans who pass due to their military service are taken care of. This is why the VA pays dependency and indemnity compensation, or DIC, to the surviving spouses of veterans. Under current law, only surviving spouses who are over the age of 55 are able to continue receiving DIC if they remarry. This is similar to other government survivor benefits, such as Social Security and Department of Defense programs, in which the survivor is able to retain their benefits even if they remarry after a certain age. H.R. 2827 would allow all survivors who remarry to keep their DIC benefits regardless of their age. I'm interested in learning more about whether it would be appropriate for DIC to be the first U.S. government survivor program to remove this restriction. Today, we will also introduce H.R. 4191, which is sponsored by House Republican Conference Chair Stefanik. This bill prevents the VA from terminating non-monetary benefits, VA benefits, such as home loans, and to certain spouses who remarry. Our nation owes a debt that we can never repay to the service members who made the ultimate sacrifice to their families. I appreciate Chair Stefanik's advocacy on behalf of the Gold Star families, and I'm looking forward to discussing how HR 4191 would impact the survivors of our fallen heroes. And then another bill we will discuss is HR 2800, the Wingman Act, which was introduced by Representative Perry. This bill grants access to VA's claims processing systems, such as the Veterans Benefits Management System, to certain full-time staffers in a congressional office. However, this access would only occur with the veteran's permission. You need to get the permission of the veterans to do this. And many veterans in my district come to my office for help with their VA claim. Oftentimes, my caseworkers have to wait weeks for VA to respond to requests for information. This can be frustrating for my veteran constituents who simply have a question about their claim, which would be answered in minutes and not weeks with this access. This bill would cut through the bureaucratic red tape and give our congressional caseworkers the tools they need to quickly assist veterans and their families. And I know many of my colleagues here today have worked hard on their proposals. I look forward to discussing how these bills would improve the lives of our veterans and their families. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Nels. And we'll now shift to our first panel, which consists of our colleagues, both those on the Veterans Affairs Committee and DAMA Subcommittee, as well as others throughout the Congress who have introduced bills that are specifically designed to help our veteran community. I'll begin by recognizing myself for 3 minutes for remarks in support of my draft bill to improve coordination between the Veterans Health Administration and the Veterans Benefits Administration with respect to claims for compensation arising from military sexual trauma and for other purposes. I'll say that this is a trio of one of 3 bills that we'll be considering today that are designed to help improve the process and help provide benefits from those who are victims of sexual assault and military sexual trauma. Sexual assault in the military continues to be a pervasive issue. These assaults, often unreported, can culminate in post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and suicide. When a veteran has the courage to report the impact of that trauma to the VA, it is essential that we treat these claims with the utmost empathy, compassion, and concern. For many veterans, submitting the claim means opening themselves up. For those who have not filed a report while in the military, this is their first opportunity for their experience to be acknowledged. This discussion draft to improve coordination between the Veterans Health Administration and Veterans Benefits Administration with respect to claims for compensation arising from military sexual trauma is one of a series of bills drafted to improve the veterans' experience during the MST claims process. My bill would require the VA to provide guidance to help veterans understand what mental health resources and other supports are in place and available to support them as they go through the claims process. By ensuring veterans who file an MST-related claim are given information on how the Veterans Crisis Line, how to make appointments with mental health providers, and connect with the VHA MST coordinators, we empower veterans to access the network of trauma-informed care that the VHA provides. For veterans who already access the VHA system of care, my bill would allow, with the veteran's consent, for relevant healthcare providers to be notified when a veteran in their care has filed an MST claim, has an examination related to the MST claim, or been notified of a decision or determination. This notification can be especially helpful when a claim has been denied or the decision is lower than a veteran may feel is warranted. It is especially important that veterans are made aware of their ability to access mental health resources and other supports, since the August 2021 VA Office of Inspector General report showed that claims were still being inappropriately denied. Thus, veteran survivors of military sexual trauma remain at risk of not receiving the VA benefits to which they are entitled and experiencing additional distress when claims are improperly handled or denied. I look forward to hearing the views of the VA and witnesses on the impact this bill would have for survivors of military sexual trauma and on claims that they file, and make sure that they are treated with the utmost care and concern. And I will now shift to the next member, Congressman Trone. You're now recognized for 3 minutes to deliver remarks in support of your draft bill, Restoring Benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act. And I'll recognize you for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Loria, for holding this hearing to discuss a host of issues, including military sexual trauma, dependent benefits, and the importance of helping veterans who are the victims of fraud. I'm thankful to have this opportunity to testify on behalf of my draft bill. It's a pleasure to join my colleagues in this important conversation, how we can best support our veterans. There are 40,000 vets living in Maryland's 6th District, and we're committed to improving each of their lives. Today, I'm here to discuss a long-standing issue affecting veterans who are victims of fraud and what we're trying to do about it. My simple legislative fix will help veterans with their families reclaim defrauded dollars and give them access to money that they rightfully deserve. Between January of 2018, September of 2019, the VA program staff processed 12,000 allegations of fraud. Upon further examination, staff found 105 veterans fell victim to fraud. This is only in a year and a half, and that's 105 veterans too many. Sadly, several of these veterans have died after these misuse allegations were received. Their cases involve thousands of dollars in misused funds that were never returned to the veterans' families. Under current law, a veteran passes away before their case is resolved. Their family can't be reimbursed for those lost dollars. That's not right. That's why we're here to discuss the bill I will soon be introducing called the Restoring Benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act. We can't always prevent fraud from happening, but we can make sure veterans and their families are reimbursed whenever possible. It's a common sense solution, and will do just that. The bill will create a simpler system for ensuring family members or their heirs of defrauded veterans are reimbursed for lost dollars. If a vet in Gaithersburg is a victim of fraud, the money should go back to that veteran or their family. I take pride in leading this effort. It's our responsibility to see the great men and women who served our country are treated properly, and we're proud to work in this legislation and look forward to continuing to support our veterans. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Trone, for introducing this measure to ensure the funds of veterans who are defrauded are given to the family of the veteran should they pass away before restoration is complete. Representative Levin, you are now recognized for 3 minutes to deliver a statement in support of your bills, the Commitment to Veteran Support and Outreach Act, and the Mark O'Brien VA Clothing Allowance Improvement Act.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Luria, Ranking Member Nels, members of the subcommittee. I really appreciate your including HR 4601, the Commitment to Veteran Support and Outreach Act, also known as the Cbso Act, and HR 4772, the Mark O'Brien Clothing Allowance Improvement Act, in today's legislative hearing. Both are bipartisan, bicameral bills that I proudly introduced to improve veterans' ability to use their benefits. The Cbso Act, which I introduced with Representatives Rosendale, Ryan, and McMorris-Rogers, would authorize VA to award competitive grants to expand the work of county veteran service officers, also known as CVSOs. CVSOs are local county employees who are nationally accredited by VA to prepare, present, and prosecute VA claims, and they're often the very first to inform veterans about their eligibility for VA programs and services. They also help enroll veterans into the Veterans Health Administration and provide assistance on a range of benefits, including service-connected disability compensation, VA home loans, education benefits, and job placement assistance. The grant funding provided under the Cbso Act will be used to improve outreach to veterans, assist in the development and submittal of claims on behalf of veterans, hire additional CVSOs, and train CVSOs for VA accreditation. In doing so, this program will strengthen economic supports, strengthen access to care, and enhance connectedness, key strategies that reduce risk and promote protective factors for suicide. Shifting gears to HR 4772, the Mark O'Brien Clothing Allowance Improvement Act, which I introduced with Representative Moore, it would improve veterans' access to clothing allowances. VA's clothing allowance is a benefit for veterans whose prosthetic, orthopedic devices, or skin medicines, which they need because of service-connected conditions, damage their clothes. I think we would all agree that service-connected veterans should not be on the hook for the cost of these damages. Unfortunately, this occurs all too often under the current system. A veteran must apply for the benefit by August 1st to receive payment that fall, and then reapply each year in order to receive the benefit again. For veterans who have lifelong conditions, having to reapply each year is unnecessarily burdensome. My bill would cut this red tape by making the VA clothing allowance an automatic recurring annual payment. VA would periodically review the claim and would only discontinue the allowance if the veteran loses eligibility. This common sense solution will save time, reduce unnecessary paperwork, and ensure veterans receive the benefits they've earned. So thank you again for including these important bipartisan, bicameral bills in today's hearing. I look forward to working with you and others to advance them through the legislative process in the coming weeks. And I yield back.
Well, thank you, Congressman Levin. Ensuring that veterans in rural areas as well as underserved populations have access to county and state officers supports the overall mission of reducing veteran suicide by increasing a veteran's ability to file claims for benefits and healthcare earned through their military service. So thank you for introducing this bill, as well as the Mark O'Brien VA Clothing Allowance Improvement Act, which streamlines, as you mentioned, the VA clothing allowance process. Again, something I think would be beneficial to our veterans. And I will now recognize Representative Mervan for 3 minutes to deliver a statement in support of the discussion draft to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve the manner in which the Board of Veterans Appeals conducts hearings regarding claims involving military sexual trauma, and to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to improve the language and practices of the Department of Veterans Affairs with respect to such claims. So Representative Mervan, you're now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to thank Chairman Luria and Ranking Member Niels for convening the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs for this important legislative hearing. I am pleased that one of the bills before the subcommittee today is a discussion draft of my legislation to amend Title 38 of the United States Code to improve the manner in which the Board of Veterans Appeals conducts hearings regarding claims involving military sexual trauma, and to direct the Secretary of Veteran Affairs to improve the language and practices of the Department of Veteran Affairs with respect to such claims. Military sexual trauma, or MST, refers to sexual assault or harassment experienced during one's military service. An astounding 1 in 4 women veterans and 1 in 100 male veterans in the VA healthcare system are MST survivors. In addition to dedicated professional medical care, these individuals may need disability benefits in order to cope with the long-lasting physical and psychological effects associated with MST and to rebuild their lives. For example, many military sexual trauma survivors experience conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic pain, which may also lead to substance abuse, homelessness, or other cascading life challenges. This is why providing the proper treatment and assistance is critical. Regrettably, MST survivors continue to experience significant difficulties in receiving disability benefits from VA. Most alarmingly, some MST survivors have even reported being re-traumatized during the claims appeal process administered by the Board of Veterans Appeals. This is unacceptable. My legislation would help ensure that the claims appeals process for MST survivors is trauma-informed. Specifically, it would prohibit the board from asking sensitive questions about the military sexual trauma survivors' experience if this information is already provided in the evidentiary record. Additionally, it would forbid the board from seeking further medical input from the agency of the original jurisdiction if the service connection of the MST-related disability has already been established by evidentiary record. Finally, my legislation would allow for an appellant to request that a board member of specific gender conduct a given appeal hearing. I firmly believe that we must view MST as a national security issue and improve the treatment of MST survivors. If we are to recruit and retain talented individuals in our military, above all, we must reform the claims appeal process to prevent the re-traumatization of any former service member seeking the benefits they need to which they are entitled. In closing, I would like to express my deep appreciation for the tireless advocacy of veterans groups that brought this issue to my and the subcommittee's attention. I would also like to thank the courage of all survivors who come forward to be able to tell their story and to seek the benefits that they are seeking. I look forward to continuing to work with the VA, veterans groups, and my colleagues on this legislation and other efforts on behalf of military sexual trauma survivors. I thank you once again for the opportunity to testify today, and Chairwoman, I yield back my time.
Thank you, Congressmember Van, for introducing this measure to increase autonomy and improve the MST claims process. Your bill, like mine and the trio that we're considering today, empower the VA to ensure veterans who have survived MST receive trauma-informed care and services. I will now shift to Representative Perry and recognize you for 3 minutes to deliver a statement in support of HR 2800, the Wingman Act. Representative Perry, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Hoping you can hear me. Good morning, Madam Chair and the ranking member, distinguished members of the committee. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Wingman Act. I see it as an important bill whose original champion was our friend, the former Congressman Ted Yoho from Florida. Through his advocacy, this critical legislation has come ever closer to passage, and it's a charge that I'm honored to take on today. It is unnecessary and unacceptable for our veterans to have to wait for weeks upon weeks and months before their constituent advocates are able to obtain access to files from the Veterans Benefits Administration, otherwise known as the VBA. It would be far more efficient if members of Congress were able to designate at most 2 congressional employees with read-only access to all records of a veteran within the VBA, and that's exactly what the Wingman Act does. The Wingman grants certified staff access, that's certified staff access to files that they already have permission to possess and review, but eliminates the burdensome step of having to use the VA as the middleman to receive them. So that's all we're talking about here. To reiterate, this legislation does not grant certified staff access to documents they don't already have permission to possess. As with all casework, constituents must first fill out a privacy release form before a congressional office can act on their behalf. Additionally, under the terms of this bill, which includes a non-recognition clause aimed at protecting veteran service organizations, certified staff will continue to refer first-time claimants to claims agents and will only take on cases after veterans' options have been completely exhausted. The need for this legislation, which passed the House by voice vote in the 114th and the 115th Congress, I think it goes without saying. After years of inaction from the VA, our constituents are looking for us to clear out the claims backlog. As of October 11th of this year, there were more than 204,000 VA backlog claims in inventory of a total of 603,000 claims. The VA has promised that to deal with the backlog and to handle an unexpected surge of backlog claims, that they have already expected to hire an additional 2,000 new employees to process the claims. And I can certainly appreciate the VA's well-meaning initiative, but it's clear that after years of inefficiency, our veterans have waited long enough for a meaningful change. There are currently 43 members of Congress co-sponsoring this bipartisan legislation, and I'm humbled to also have the support of AMVETS as well. I extend my gratitude to the committee and again commend the Wingman Act for your consideration. Thank you very much, and I yield the balance.
Thank you, Congressman Perry, and we greatly appreciate your desire to find new ways to improve the speed at which veterans can get access to answers on their claims. Representative Connolly, I will recognize you next for 3 minutes to speak on your bill, HR 4633, the Veteran Fraud Reimbursement Act.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Ranking Member Nels. Let me summarize rather than read a statement. Essentially, there is an issue with fiduciary fraud that occurs sometimes when somebody is charged with a fiduciary responsibility when veterans can't handle their own financial affairs and other related matters. And there's a method for adjudicating fraud, but that method didn't get to individual fiduciaries. It only dealt with institutions and fiduciaries responsible for 10 or more veterans. But Congress attempted to fix that and allow adjudication and reimbursement for veterans who'd been defrauded who worked for who were with other kinds of fiduciaries. Unfortunately, inadvertently, Congress then created a new standard that requires a broad determination of fraud that is now very time consuming and is having an impact on all fiduciary fraud for all veterans who might be affected. That was never our intention. And so my bill would fix that. We actually introduced this bill with the encouragement of VBA, the Veterans Benefits, because they're experiencing these huge backlogs. It now takes well over 400 days to try to adjudicate. For a lot of veterans who need fiduciaries because they're disabled, they're on fixed incomes, they may have other kinds of health issues that preclude them from being able to manage their own affairs. Waiting 400 days can be, very, very threatening in terms of rent, late payments, and other kinds of necessities in their lives. This bill is really needed so we can clear up something that was inadvertently created by Congress itself. I'm proud of the fact it's been endorsed by the Military Officers Association of America, by the VFW, and by the Wounded Warriors Program. And with that, I urge the subcommittee to endorse the bill, and let's try to get it passed at markup on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
Well, thank you, Representative Connolly, for introducing this legislation to ensure that these vulnerable veterans are not taken advantage of and that repayment is swift. We really appreciate you bringing this before the subcommittee. Next, I would like to recognize Representative Bsos for 3 minutes to speak on behalf of your bill, HR 2568, the United States Cadet Nurse Corps Service Recognition Act of 2021. Representative Bsos, you're now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Luria. And I also want to thank Ranking Member Nels for bringing the Cadet Nurse Service Recognition Act in front of the committee today. Let me also take a moment to say thank you to
Got a problem with fraud. We screwed up.
Oh, Representative Connolly, I believe you were not muted. Thank you.
All right. Let me also take just a second to thank the members who are on the committee who are co-sponsoring my bill: Lois Frankel, Lauren Underwood, Alyssa Slotkin, and again, Chairwoman Elaine Luria. Thank you so much for your co-sponsorship of this. I first introduced this bipartisan and bicameral bill in the 115th Congress. And so really, really happy that your committee is willing to review it today. So what service did cadet nurses provide that deserves recognition? Let me share that very quickly. At the height of World War II, the United States faced a severe shortage of trained nurses, and it threatened our ability to meet both our military medical needs and the needs here at home. So in response, Congress established what's called the Cadet Nurse Corps back in 1943 as an integrated uniformed service of the Public Health Administration. The Cadet Nurse Corps provided young women with expedited nursing education in exchange for service in essential nursing for the duration of the war. Go to 1944. The Federal Security Agency nationally recognized cadet nurses for rendering a vital war service. In total, nearly 120,000 women completed the Corps' rigorous training. Cadet nurses served in the military, they served in the Veterans Administration, they served in private and public hospitals until the program ended in 1948. However, despite their service during our nation's time of need, they have never been bestowed veteran status. My bill would change that. This legislation will provide an honorary veteran status to all of World War II cadet nurses and a burial plaque or grave marker honoring their service. This bill does not provide burial rights at Arlington National Cemetery or additional VA benefits. It simply, but importantly, pays our nation's respects to the incredible service these women provided nearly 80 years ago. Sadly, most of the women who served as U.S. cadet nurses have passed away, but while an official count of surviving cadet nurses does not exist, the number likely is less than 1,000, and most of these women are now in their 90s. Time is running out for our nation to thank and honor the few surviving cadet nurses for their service and sacrifice. And the United States Cadet Nurse Corps Service Recognition Act is just one way we can express our appreciation for their efforts. I want to thank the committee members and staff for your time today in considering this priority legislation of mine. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Bsos, for introducing this legislation. that recognizes the work of so many of these women during World War II. And I think that this pandemic has again shown us that the impact of nurses and nursing shortages can have within our community. And as you said as well, many of these women who are still surviving definitely deserve this recognition, and we hope that we can continue to promote this legislation. Next, I would like to recognize Representative Hayes for 3 minutes to speak on HR 3402, the Caring for Survivors Act of 2021. Thank you, Representative Hayes, for coming before our subcommittee, and you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Loria, for holding this important hearing and for welcoming me here today to talk about my bill, HR 3402, the Caring for Survivors Act. I also want to thank Chairman John Tester, who introduced the Senate version of this bipartisan, bicameral bill to help service members and their families. The concept behind my bill, supporting the families of our brave heroes who have given the ultimate sacrifice, is one that is welcomed and agreed upon by all members of Congress across the political spectrum. I introduced the Caring for Survivors Act of 2021 to ensure that the surviving spouses of our service members get the benefits their loved ones have earned. The bill would expand eligibility and increase payments for dependency and indemnity compensation, or DIC benefits, for those survivors. Dependency and indemnity compensation is a tax-free monetary benefit available to the families of service members who have died in the line of duty and the families of disabled veterans who died from a service-connected health condition. Currently, the Department of Veterans Affairs restricts eligibility for survivors if their veteran spouse was disabled for less than 10 years before their death. Due to the restrictive timelines for approval, DIC payments lag behind other federal program payments by nearly 12%. My bill cuts that eligibility requirement in half so that the veteran spouse only need to be disabled for 5 years before they are eligible rather than 10. Also, the compensation rate for family members of service members and veterans has been minimally adjusted since it was established in 1993. That means for more than 2 decades, as the cost of living has steadily increased, these survivors have been forced to make tough decisions on where they can live, what medications they can afford, what groceries they can buy. My bill helps alleviate that burden by giving survivors an additional $300 per month in benefits. We owe it to the brave men and women who put their lives on the line to take care of their families and get them the support that they need. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to come before the committee today. And I urged all of the members, not only on this call, but who have also not seen this bill or co-sponsored it, to take a look at it, because our veterans could truly use our help, and the families, the surviving family members, are relying on us to make sure that their needs are met. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have, and I yield back.
Well, thank you, Representative Hayes, for your work on this bill. And the Caring for Survivors Act of 2021 would, as you said, bring the dependency and indemnity compensation payment, or DIC, to match what federal survivors receive, as well as a way to care for families of veterans who died prior to the current 10-year window required for families to receive this benefit. So thank you for bringing this before our subcommittee. And next, I will shift to Representative Delgado. I'll recognize you for 3 minutes to speak on HR 2724, the VA Peer Support Enhancement for MST Survivors Act. Representative Delgado, you are recognized for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Loria and Ranking Member Nels, for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of my bipartisan bill, the VA Peer Support Enhancement for MST Survivors Act. I introduced this legislation with Representative Nancy Mace, a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. I want to thank her for her partnership on this very important issue. Our bill is simple. It would establish a peer support program at the Veterans Benefits Administration for survivors of military sexual trauma. While the Veterans Health Administration has a peer support system for MST survivors, and the Department of Defense has its own victim advocate program, the VBA has no similar programs. As such, MST survivors receive no formal mental health support as part of their application process at the VBA. As many of you know, the MST claims process can be difficult for veterans and have an impact on their mental health. The application process is complicated and convoluted and frequently requires survivors to tell and retell their story and how it impacts their lives. The VA Peer Support Enhancement for MST Survivors Act would ensure that survivors have trauma-informed support throughout their claims process. I'm honored to say that my bill is endorsed by many of our nation's most prominent VSOs, including the American Legion, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and the Modern Military Association of America. It is essential that the VA is a safe and welcoming space for all of our nation's veterans, including MST survivors. It is long overdue that we create equity for trauma-informed support between the VBA and VHA. I urge the committee to join me in supporting this critical legislation. I thank you again for holding this hearing and yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Delgado. Peer support, as you said, can be a vital component in a person's recovery process. And for those going through the process of filing an MST claim, having someone with you, especially another veteran, to support you through the claims process can be very helpful. And this bill, as well as those introduced by myself and Representative Mervan, are a trio of bills aimed at making the process for MST survivors more empathetic. And thank you for being part of that effort. I believe that we have one more member who is joining us to discuss a bill, but I do not see that she has logged in yet. So while we're waiting for her to join, do any other members of the subcommittee wish to comment on any of the bills that have been introduced on the agenda today? Okay, so hearing no comment, I see that our other member has joined. And last but not least, we have Representative Slotkin, who I will recognize for 3 minutes to deliver a statement in support of her newly introduced bill, the Justice for Als Veterans Act of 2021. And
yes, apologies for being late. I was on the floor, everyone. I'm sorry about that. Chairwoman Luria, ranking member, distinguished members of the Disability Assistance, the DAMA subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today on HR 5607, the Justice for Als Veterans Act. This bipartisan bill will ensure that the families of veterans diagnosed with ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease continue to receive appropriate benefits they deserve after the veteran's passing. First, I want to thank leadership of HVAC and this subcommittee for their commitment to veterans and their families. Second, I'd like to thank my Veterans Advisory Board back home for all the other stakeholders in the district who've provided input on this bill and that we're discussing here today. And finally, thank you to the countless veterans and veteran families across my district who have shared their experiences with me and given me direct feedback on how we can better serve them. Both in my office and here on the committee. As you know, the VA provides dependency and indemnity compensation to the surviving family of service members and veterans who pass away. These surviving family members can also receive supplemental dependency and indemnity compensation benefits, commonly referred to as dependency and indemnity compensation kicker, in the case of veterans who had particularly severe service-connected disabilities for at least 8 years at the time of their passing. The VA recognizes ALS as a presumptive service-connected disease, and due to its progressive nature, it's automatically rated at 100% disability. As such, the only barrier to the surviving family members of a veteran who loses their life to ALS receiving that kicker is having the diagnoses for at least 8 years at the time of their passing. Unfortunately, many veterans with ALS are unable to meet that 8-year requirement because the average life expectancy of a person diagnosed with ALS is 2 to 5 years. This means that surviving families rarely receive the critical supplemental benefit. That's why I'm introducing this Justice for ALS Veterans Act with my friend, Congressman Fitzpatrick, a co-chair of the Congressional ALS Caucus, of which I'm also a member. So quite simply, the bill extends increased dependency and indemnity compensation to the surviving spouse of a veteran with ALS, regardless of how long the veteran was diagnosed with ALS prior to their passing. It's our responsibility to honor our veterans and their families, not just with words, but with action. And I believe this straightforward tweak to our current law will have tremendous impact on surviving families with veterans with ALS. I'm looking forward to working with the subcommittee on this. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak, and I yield back.
Well, thank you, Congressman Slotkin, and especially for bringing this bill forward. From what you heard from veterans in our community, I know that they greatly appreciate your work on their behalf, and I think that this bill has the potential to truly impact the families of veterans, like you said, who are taken far too quickly due to this aggressive terminal disease. So we look forward to continuing to move your legislation forward. And now that we have concluded hearing from both members on the committee and who've joined us from outside of the Veterans Affairs Committee, does anyone who is on panel one, any members of Congress, wish to comment further on the bills that we are considering today? Mr. Elsie, were you seeking to speak?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to Representative Slotkin. When I was in Afghanistan in 2001, we took a battery of vaccination shots, and shortly after our return in November of 2001, after the start of OEF, a friend of mine was taken by ALS, and he passed away in a couple of years. So I'd just like to say thank you to Representative Slotkin for bringing that bill forward.
Thank you, Representative Elsie. Do any other members wish to speak regarding any of the bills that we're considering today? Okay, hearing no comments, we will now shift to panel number 2. And I would like to introduce our second panel, witnesses from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Testifying before us today, Dr. Elijah Carter, Executive Director for Pension and Fiduciary Service, Veterans Benefits Administration. He's accompanied by Ms. Cheryl Rawls, Executive Director, the Office of Outreach, Transition, and Economic Development Service from the Veterans Benefits Administration, as well as Dr. Marsden McGuire, Deputy Chief Consultant, Mental Health Services with the Veterans Health Administration. Welcome to all of you who are joining us today. I will remind our witnesses, please pause for 2 to 3 seconds before you begin speaking so that we can capture all of your words. And please remember to do so again when answering any questions from members of the committee. Your written statements will be included in full in the hearing record without objection. Dr. Carter, I'll recognize you for 5 minutes for VA's remarks on the bills before the subcommittee today. Dr. Carter, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Loria, Ranking Member Niels, and other members of the subcommittee, good morning, and thank you for inviting us here today to present VA's views on bills that would affect VA programs and services. Joining me today are Dr. Marsden McGuire, Director, Continuum of Care and General Mental Health in the Veterans Health Administration, and Ms. Cheryl Rawls, Executive Director for the Office of Outreach, Transition, and Economic Development in the Veterans Benefits Administration. VA supports several of the 14 bills on the agenda today, including HR 3793, which amends current authorities to support not only veterans, but their families as well by increasing the maximum amount of insurance coverage available, and HR 4633, which would improve the process of repayment of funds misused by fiduciary. The bill would enable more timely reissuance of misused benefits and application of VA resources towards more effective methods of oversight to protect beneficiary funds. VA also supports the intent of the draft bill, Justice for ALS Veterans Act, and sees an opportunity to collaborate with the subcommittee to consider inclusion of surviving spouses of veterans who pass away from other rapidly progressive diseases such as cancer or Parkinson's disease. In addition, VA supports other bills on the agenda in principle, and we are ready to work with the committee to provide additional information and assistance. Notably, we welcome the opportunity to discuss HR 4772 so that we can increase the effectiveness of the proposed amendments to the clothing allowance program. Similarly, VA supports the draft bill restoring benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act in principle, and are ready to work with the subcommittee to address concerns related to terminology and clarity to ensure a more accurate interpretation and implementation. Additionally, VA is looking forward to continuing to work with the subcommittee and providing technical assistance as it relates to HR 3402, the Caring for Survivors Act of 2021, which would improve and expand eligibility for DIC benefits paid to certain survivors of certain veterans. VA considers outreach as an integral part of VA's customer experience framework to engage veterans, service members, survivors, and caregivers. VA values the partnerships it has with veteran service organizations to include state, county, and tribal veteran service officers who are affiliated with them, and continues to look for opportunities to engage with, further engage with organizations. For instance, from October 1st, 2020 through August 1st, 2021, VA participated in more than 4,500 outreach events, reaching over 215,000 veterans, service members, survivors, dependents, and eligible beneficiaries. VA supports the concept of HR 4601 and appreciates the committee's efforts to improve outreach to veterans through county veteran service officers and tribal veteran service officers through several states. However, the department requests technical amendments to the bill and notes additional resources would be needed in order to stand up the program. We also suggest clarification of certain amendments in the bill, including the recognition of tribal organization. VA recognizes the sacrifices of Gold Star spouses have made for our country. To honor the legacy of their loved ones, VA continues to ensure that the spouse and their families receive the benefits and services they have earned. Regarding HR 4191, VA supports ensuring that Gold Star spouses have enduring access to VA benefits to which they are entitled, and seeks to collaborate with the subcommittee to address points of clarity regarding the phrase non-monetary benefits. VA supports the goals of the draft bill, coordination between VHA and VBA regarding MST claims, but we detail in our testimony certain technical concerns with the bill as written. VA appreciates the latitude in this bill that would allow VA to continue pursuing a patient-centric approach to care while still addressing important issues such as improving coordination between VBA and VHA and increasing veterans' awareness of available resources. Lastly, VA wishes to work with the subcommittee on technical amendments to address our concerns to the HR 2724 bill regarding clarity of the nature and duration of support services that VA will be required to provide MST claimants. Without clarification, we cannot determine the extent to which the proposed peer support specialist role would overlap or conflict with functions currently provided by VBA and VHA employees. In such a sensitive and important area, we are ready to work with the committee to clarify the proposal and our current services. This concludes my statement, Madam Chair. We would be happy to answer any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. And as we begin our questions, I'll just remind my colleagues to pause for 2 to 3 seconds when you're recognized to speak. I'll start by first recognizing myself for 5 minutes for questions of our witnesses. And so I'll start with Ms. Rawls. As mentioned earlier, Representatives Mervan, Delgado, and I are working to improve the experience that MST survivors have as they go through the MST claim process. And we want to ensure that that process does not result in re-traumatization of survivors. What efforts is the VA doing to ensure that the veteran feels safe to come forward with their claim and request those benefits that they're entitled to?
Well, thank you very much, Chairwoman Loria, for that question. And it is truly our pleasure to be here to respond to that. So the VBA has consistently worked to improve our outreach efforts in ensuring that we have clear information out there for people to read and to know that we want to help them. Last year, we did a new MST outreach letter. It was in conjunction with VHA. And so this fact sheet really honed in on the language of sensitivity, and it also brought in additional resources that they could go out and seek for us. That was just one item.
Can I interrupt for a second? I'm sorry. Who was the audience? Who was that sent to? Was that people who've already filed claims? Was that broadly sent to all veterans? Who did you forward that information to?
Yes, ma'am. So the fact sheet was actually put out on our outward facing modalities. So if you came to VHA or VBA and you researched MST, you would be able to find this MST fact sheet out there.
So how do you define it as outreach if someone has to actually be looking for it on your website? I mean, did you actually send anything to veterans directly? without them
No, Madam
requesting?
Chairwoman, and that is a great point that you're bringing to the table. We can be a little more forceful in sending this information out there, but I will supplement this response and say that anytime we do grant benefits, that information is also in their benefit letter. So they have the opportunity to research how to get in touch with anyone in VBA or VHA.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to switch now to talk more about one of the comments that was made in the testimony. And you mentioned that you feel that the notification to the VHA after a veteran has received a decision, especially after a determination where they've been denied, is not necessary. Yet, hearing directly from veterans in our community, veterans who've reached out to our office who are survivors, especially those who have not had a claim recognized and received benefits. I mean, that's a very traumatic thing. Why would you think that it's not necessary for everyone involved in their care, both mental health care, their primary care provider, to understand this very critical circumstance about what a veteran might be going through? And but Ms. Rawls and Dr. McGuire, would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. If you don't mind, Dr. McGuire, I'll take this first and then bring you in. Our concerns was around the privacy issues that has been well articulated, that not everyone comes to us for information or assistance with their claims. And so we really want to make sure that this process that we put in place does include the wants of that MST survivor in sharing that information. Dr. McGuire, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Rawls, for the opportunity to add to this discussion. I think the general point to be made here is that we want a process that ensures no unintended re-traumatization. And automatic notification, even with the ability to opt out or with consent in place, in principle, it makes sense. So there's no disagreement, but in the implementation, we need to be very, very careful with MST claimants for all the reasons that people have already mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do understand the need to not create a process that could inadvertently re-traumatize someone, but also wanting to make sure that everyone who's providing care to a survivor within their healthcare team, whether that be mental health or primary care, has the information they need in order to best provide that care. So I do understand it's a delicate balance, and perhaps we can continue to work together to find the way to make sure that we do that in the best interest of the veteran. So thank you for your comments there. And now I would like to recognize Representative Nels for 5 minutes for questions for our witnesses.
Thank you, Chair Luria. My question, good Dr. Carter, and first off, thank you all for being here, but please explain why the VA supports the increase to the maximum coverage rates for the Sgli and Vgli program in HR 3793. So why does the VA support such an increase? I think you're muted, sir. Dr. Carter?
Yes, sir, I was. Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Nils. VA fully supports this bill, as noted in the testimony, in which the bill is to increase the maximum coverage up to 500K. And we increase it simply because it's the right thing to do for our service members and for our veterans.
Very well. HR 2724, Dr. Carter, would require the VBA to provide each veteran filing a claim related to MST with a peer support specialist Has the VBA ever provided counseling or emotional support services to veterans? And does the VBA have the expertise to carry out such a program?
Thank you for the question as well, sir. I would like to invite my colleagues, Dr. McGuire, and followed by Ms. Rawls to address that.
Thank you, Dr. Carter, for the opportunity to address this. I believe that the question was specifically directed to VBA's capabilities. Perhaps I misunderstood that. So please repeat the question.
Thank you, Dr. McGuire. The question is, HR 2724 would require the VBA to provide each veteran filing a claim related to MST with a peer support specialist. Has VBA ever provided counseling or emotional support services to veterans? And does VBA have the expertise to carry out such a program?
Okay. Thank you for repeating. I'm going to ask Ms. Rawls, my colleague, to address this first and then hand back to me if she chooses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So absolutely not. We do not have the expertise. Right now, our outreach coordinators are all about getting the claims process. That's our general business. That's what we focus on. So this would be something new for us. Now, we have had training symposiums in which we have had VHA come in and talk to us about not re-traumatizing. We've had trainings on specific how to talk to people and how to take care of yourself if you're processing claims, but we have not had that type of specific training. So thank you.
Very good. Dr. McGuire, then, what peer and emotional support services does the VHA already provide to the veterans?
Peer specialist services within VHA are provided by what we call peer specialists, not peer support specialists. And the reason for that, it's a very specifically defined healthcare role. It requires that the veteran have the lived experience of a mental health condition. It's built on a trusting relationship with the veteran that addresses the veteran's needs that stem from their own mental health condition and related circumstances. We provide that at every VA facility to men and women veterans, and we work as closely as we can with VBA to take handoffs when there's a concern about a specific veteran who might benefit from those healthcare services within VHA. Thank you.
I thank you all again for being here. Chair Luria, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Nels. I will now recognize Representative Ruiz for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this very important hearing. As we prepare to acknowledge November as National Family Caregivers Month, it is extremely timely that we meet today to discuss legislation that recognizes the contributions and sacrifices that military and veterans caregivers make. It is long overdue that our caregivers receive increased assistance to ease their financial burdens. The Caring for Survivors Act is a vital step forward in alleviating some of that hardship. This bill increases survivor caregivers' benefits to help ensure they do not have to worry about their financial well-being after losing their loved one. In addition, the bill will expand eligibility so that more surviving caregivers qualify for this benefit. As a longtime advocate for military and veteran caregivers, I support this important update to our benefit system. Mr. Carter, In your testimony, you stated that the VA would need 1 year after the enactment of the Caring for Survivors Act to implement these changes due to extensive information system updates and to conduct oversight. Can you please elaborate on what kind of system updates are needed, what conducting oversight entails, and why it would require additional time to complete?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Ruiz. VA did request the amendment reflecting the effective date of 1 year as opposed to 6 months after the day of enactment. The rationale for this request is inclusive of those, as you mentioned, those extensive system updates required to implement. But it also includes the ability to conduct quality oversight, which is key for making sure that veterans and survivors and all of our beneficiaries are paid accurately. The system enhancements not only impact our main claim processing application. I think one of the intros was the Veteran Benefits Management System, but it also impacts our automation engine. VA definitely would like to work with the subcommittee on the clarifications previously mentioned to make sure that we have right information for costing. As it exists, VA automates a great deal of our dependency and indemnity compensation claims. I believe we automated in excess of 13,000 last year. So those are some of the reasons why we want to make sure if we update our main system that we update our automation engine as well, because if we had to stop those, then it may prolong the claims process and we may have to retroactively fix some of those payments going forward.
Thank you so much. And I apologize. I believe your title is Dr. Carter, correct?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. So Dr. Carter, you also mentioned that an application received more than a year after a death cannot result in VA providing benefits retroactive to the date of death. At what point does the VA consider an application considered received? And I say this because many families often have applications for benefits pending for longer than a year. And I want to ensure that this disqualification does not include these applications. So to repeat my question, at what point does the VA consider an application considered received?
The date of receipt, sir.
Okay, so then the time it takes for these benefits being pending, does it affect when they can receive it? Because for no fault of the veterans, the VA can have a backlog or take longer than a year. So by the time they process them, due to the VA's lag time, can the veteran be disqualified for those benefits?
No, sir. That's an excellent question. No, sir. And that falls along the lines of our intent to file process, where the veteran has a year to come back and formalize that claim.
Okay, I appreciate you, Dr. Carter, and thank you for your work, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Ruiz. I just want to ask remaining members if anyone would like to question our witnesses. And Ranking Member Nels or Representative Ruiz, would you be interested in posing a second round of questions to our witnesses?
I'm good. Thank you.
No, ma'am, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also see that Mr. Elzy just joined us. Mr. Elzy, would you like an opportunity to ask any questions of our witnesses?
No, thank you, ma'am.
Well, thank you. And I would like to say thank you again to our witnesses from the VA, Dr. Carter, Ms. Rawls, and Dr. McGuire. We appreciate you participating and providing insights from the VA, both the VBA and VHA, into our pending legislation. And we look forward to continuing to work with you to refine these pieces of legislation and to best serve our veterans moving forward. So thank you again for your participation. And I will now shift to our third panel. We are pleased today to have representatives from 4 veteran service organizations with us. And your insights on these pieces of legislation are always invaluable to our subcommittee. And we thank you for your ongoing work to support our nation's veterans and our nation. And All of the VSOs are proof that service continues after military service for many people. Our witnesses joining us today are Mr. Jeremy Villanueva, Assistant National Legislative Director for Disabled American Veterans, Mr. Corey Titus, Director of Veterans Benefits and Guard Reserve Affairs from the Military Officers Association of America, and Ms. Brigitte McCoy, CEO and founder of Women Veterans Social Justice Network, as well as Mr. Derek Frandenberger, Government Affairs Director from the Wounded Warrior Project. As we get started, I'll remind our witnesses again to please pause for 2 to 3 seconds before speaking. Your written statements will be included in the full hearing record without objection. And I'll start by recognizing Mr. Villanueva for 5 minutes for your remarks concerning the bills that are before us today. Mr. Villanueva, you're recognized.
Thank you. Chairwoman Luria, Ranking Member Nels, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting DAV to testify at this legislative hearing of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs. DAV is a nonprofit charity that provides a lifetime of support for veterans of all generations and their families. In 2020, DAV helped veterans with well over 160,000 benefits claims. And DAV services are offered at no cost to all veterans, their families, and survivors. I'm honored to provide our views on the legislation before the subcommittee today to highlight the bills on this agenda that would improve the lives of those who have sacrificed for this nation, namely survivors. My full written testimony addresses the entirety of the bills on today's agenda, but I would like to highlight 3 issues facing this worthy group and ways we can improve dependency indemnity compensation, or DIC. The Justice for ALS Veterans Act would provide the survivors of veterans who die of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, the DIC kicker amount without meeting the 8-year time period requirement. Current law allows an additional DIC monthly payment to survivors in the case of a veteran who at the time of death was in receipt of or was entitled to receive compensation for a service-connected disability that was rated totally disabling for a continuous period of at least 8 years immediately preceding death. This monetary installment is commonly referred to as the DIC kicker. However, ALS is an aggressive disease that leaves many veterans totally incapacitated relatively quickly, and once diagnosed, have an average lifespan of between 2 to 5 years. Sadly, many are unable to meet the 8-year requirement, leaving those surviving family members ineligible. DAV supports the Justice for ALS Veterans Act, which would provide this kicker to surviving spouses of veterans who die from ALS, regardless of how long they've been rated as totally disabled. Madam Chairwoman, President Lyndon Johnson noted that America shows its gratitude, not only in memorials which grace city parks and courthouse squares across the land, but more meaningfully in the programs which care for the veterans and their survivors. To honor these veterans, we should ensure that, to the best extent possible, their families are taken care of by the nation that they have served, and those who have laid so costly a sacrifice on the altar of freedom are honored for their sacrifice. Spouses, children, and parents who have stepped up to care for those who have sacrificed their health for this nation. Some have sacrificed their livelihood to support their disabled loved one. These men and women have also served their country by caring for those who have worn the uniform. And when these caregivers have become survivors, we should not forget about them. DAV strongly supports this legislation, which would improve DIC by increasing the amount paid to survivors of disabled veterans and expand the eligibility criteria. Since DIC was created in 1993, major improvements have been legislated only once in 2003. Since that time, DIC rates have failed to keep up with the cost of living. And now that we see the combined effects of a pandemic plus a war that has spanned 2 decades, the urgency for these improvements is dire. When a service-disabled veteran passes away, not only does the surviving spouse have to deal with the heartache of losing their loved one, but they also have to contend with the loss of their veterans' compensation. This loss to a survivor's budget is devastating, especially if the spouse was also the veteran's caregiver and dependent on that compensation as their sole income source. The Caring for Survivors Act would increase the rate of compensation for DIC to 55% of a totally disabled veteran's compensation. It would create a new minimum for those who are in receipt of rank-based death benefits prior to 1993. In essence, the rank-based recipients who were receiving less than the base amount for DIC would receive a much-needed increase, while those who currently receive more would be able to keep the greater of the 2 amounts. In recognition of the severity of many disabilities and the impact on veterans and their families, a veteran that is 100% disabled for 10 consecutive years before the veteran's death, surviving spouses and minor children are eligible for DIC benefits. However, if a veteran dies due to a non-service connected condition before they reach this 10-year mark, their dependents are not eligible for this benefit. This happens even though many of these survivors put their careers on hold to act as primary caregivers for the veteran. And now with the loss of the veteran could potentially be left destitute. HR 3402 would modify the DIC program and institute a partial DIC benefit starting at 5 years. This would mean if a veteran is rated as totally disabled for 5 years and dies, a survivor would be eligible for 50% of the total DIC benefit, increasing until the 10-year threshold is reached. Madam Chairwoman, with the recent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the closing of this chapter in American history, we must remember Abraham Lincoln's challenge to the nation, that one of this nation's obligations, our sacred duty, was to care for those who had borne the battle, to include their widows and orphans. Survivors deserve at least this much. This concludes my testimony, and I would be happy to answer any questions you or the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Villanueva, and thank you for the work that you continue to do on behalf of our veterans with the Disabled Veterans of America, the DAV. I would like to now recognize Mr. Titus with the Military Officers Association of America for your testimony. Mr. Titus, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chair Luria, Ranking Member Nels, members of the HVAC DAMA Subcommittee, and all the dedicated staff. The Military Officers Association of America appreciates the opportunity to offer our views on pending legislation before the committee. The subcommittee has many bills before it that will make a tremendous impact on the lives of veteran survivors and their families if enacted. And I'll use my time to focus on a few of the pending bills. Few rely more on the VA than veterans with lifelong injuries. However, for those with permanent injuries, the VA still requires a request of clothing allowance annually. Approximately 40,000 veterans were approved for a clothing allowance last fiscal year, and the vast majority will need this allowance into the future. We should remove unnecessary administrative barriers wherever possible, and a great place to focus is on the improvement of the clothing allowance process for the tens of thousands of veterans with lifelong conditions. MOA supports HR 4772, the Mark O'Brien VA Clothing Allowance Improvement Act, requiring service-disabled veterans to reapply annually for a lifelong disability is unnecessary. It does not make sense for the veteran to refile such claims, nor for the VA to spend time reviewing them. An additional process that we can improve is how we reimburse veterans who are victims of fiduciary fraud or misuse. Current laws limit the VBA's ability to reissue these benefits to veterans, and GAO found that it takes an average of 468 days for a veteran to get their money back in fiduciary abuse cases. The legislation enhances VBA's ability to reimburse veterans and implement other quality assurance methods to safeguard taxpayer dollars. The bill would allow for more immediate repayments in the veterans of fiduciary fraud or misuse. MOA supports HR 4633, the Veteran Fraud Reimbursement Act. Currently, $1.7 million is awaiting negligence determinations, when likely all of it should be in the back in the pocket of veterans. This bill will help expedite reimbursement reviews, cut through red tape, and help veterans, many who are on fixed incomes, recover after misuse or fraud from a fiduciary. We are now approaching 2 decades since the maximum policy amounts for the service member and veterans group life insurance have been raised. Congress increased the Sgli and Vgli rights from $250,000 to $400,000 in 2005, but the rates have not been reassessed since then. MOA supports HR 3793, the Supporting Families of the Fallen Act. This adjustment is long overdue and will allow Sgli and Vgli to keep up with inflation. The legislation is ultimately about supporting the families of service members, and MOA urges the subcommittee to support this important modernization of life insurance. I will close by sharing the words of Katie Hubbard, the surviving spouse of Command Sergeant Major James Hubbard Jr., on what dependency and indemnity compensation parity would mean to her and her family. She says, an increase in DIC would mean a little less stress each month and a little less stress and worry each month. That increase would ensure money for groceries and basic necessities would be covered each month, and I wouldn't have to struggle as much to ensure the rest of the ends would be met. It would mean I could travel 3 hours to see our grandson without wondering how to fit that expense into the budget. It would mean that I would have a few extra hours each month to spend with my son on extra learning opportunities, family time without constraints, and play. It would mean a little less stress mom for him to enjoy playing with Legos or cars without thinking about whether I worked enough that day for the bills and food. Katie is one of 438,000 surviving spouses who would benefit from matching the DIC rate to that of other survivors of federal civilian workers. Not only have our survivors sacrificed when their loved one paid the ultimate price, but they have served alongside them as they moved all over the country to help defend our nation. Through their family's service, their ability to contribute to Social Security and retirement accounts was also affected. DIC is a vital financial resource for our survivors, and parity is long overdue. MOA supports HR 3402, the Caring for Survivors Act. Survivors of uniformed service members deserve parity with our other fallen federal employees. Establishing DSC at the 55% level is long overdue. I thank you for the opportunity to present MOA's views. We look forward to working with the subcommittee to enact improvements to the lives of veterans and survivors. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Titus. And I will next recognize Ms. Brigitte McCoy with the Women Veterans Social Justice Network for testimony. You are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairwoman Loria, Ranking Member Nels, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting Women Veterans Social Justice Network to testify in this legislative hearing. Women Veterans Social Justice Network is a nonprofit organization that advocates inclusion, equity, and advancement of women of military service from all areas of service, all service times, and all service branches. We are a volunteer multi-platform network supporting and honoring past and present military service women while equipping them for leadership in philanthropy and entrepreneurship, technology, civic community engagement, and personal economic expansion. We electronically convene with over 50 networks of community networks through integrated information sharing and collaborative work. Military sexual assault survivors and survivor advocates experience a myriad of challenges navigating a world with polytraumas and seeking post-military medical care. I know because I embarked on that journey, stopping and starting multiple times over a 20-year process. Applying for compensation claims can be a gauntlet with numerous levels and various points within the process, including multi-layers of coordination of care and gathering pertinent documentation. Each step can be a severely debilitating ordeal when the veteran has endured trauma and has a limited understanding of the adjudication process, is also isolated in the process, and has no one to establish a level of trust to communicate concerns in real time. These reforms that have been mentioned today have the potential to improve the outcomes of survivors in an immediate way. WVSJ Network, Inc. favors legislation that will improve outcomes and experiences of military sexual assault survivors directly and indirectly. Improving the quality of life of veterans through the claims process could be an important measure to decrease homelessness and suicide in this sexual assault community. Improvements of outreach methods, technological access, efficiency, and social connected support is needed to facilitate appropriate care to military sexual trauma survivors, regardless of their gender identity, their race, their socioeconomic status, or their location. With recent reforms and more community awareness, increased future claims are likely. As military personnel transition from the military with injuries that include sexual traumas, the need for up-to-date technology, efficiencies, and customer-focused services will become increasingly vital. We present these recommendations for sexual assault survivors legislation discussions and drafts. Many echo the legislation's language and spirit with a few additional thoughts. These improvements implemented on a small scale with the sexual assault claims process could be impactful improvements to benefit the larger claims community in the future. One of the areas that was discussed was peer specialist support. Peers need specialized ethics training, trauma-informed experience, personal accountability, and also a network of senior peer support leaders to support them. One of the other recommendations that we have is for improved job grade classification alongside of that skill training, and giving the peer support specialists a level of authority to actually do more than just stand alongside of their peer, but to actually advocate on their behalf. Offering accompaniment to appointments for those who are just beginning their VA treatment experience, peers that are gender specific for the veteran and knowledgeable in utilizing the VA and the VBA systems. It's an imperative that funding is appropriate for authority for the continued programming of this legislation, and also improved understanding of disability variations for veterans with cognitive and physical disabilities for better support. And what I'm saying there is that in each of those stages, that someone who is well aware of different disabilities can offer the appropriate support during that process. As it relates to outreach, culturally responsive, survivor-centered, trauma-informed outreach practices are important for the level of impact needed to support military sexual assault survivors. I'm going to talk about technology a little later, but at this particular point, it's important to actually engage in outreach, utilizing multi-platform electronic technology outreach, chatbots, mobile technology like texting and SMS messaging could be implemented to be in support of better outreach programs. A no harassment zone, while this may not seem like it's an outreach, an area of outreach, it is an area of support to outreach, making the VBA and any outside contractors for claims, including community care, making those places safe spaces to seek medical and mental health treatment by ensuring a zero tolerance for sexual harassment, assault, whether that be on-site or electronically. Affirming language, I have a couple of points, but my main points are including recovery-oriented care language that is non-accusatory towards the survivor, and remove or explain abbreviated legal terms so that experiences are not stigmatized by incomplete or inappropriate language. As it relates to technology, the use of more up-to-date and an integrated technology to create a seamless process has the potential to reduce the harm caused to veterans and their families waiting through significant delays during the claims process. Technology is impactful on claims. Funding for the research and analytics for peer specialists to be a part of the improvement process of sexual assault survivor claims. Establishing a coalition of innovators who have military sexual assault coalition experience to bring cultural competency and insight to the claims process understanding, and can help improve the design, development, and implementation of programs and services for survivors. Women Veterans Social Justice Network ambassadors stand by to support improving current and future legislation that impacts women and sexual assault survivors. That concludes my statement. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Ms. McCoy, for the work that you and your organization do, and thank you for appearing before the subcommittee today. I finally will hear from Mr. Fraunenbarger from the Wounded Warrior Project. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Loria, Chairman Nels, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Disability and Memorial Affairs. Thank you for inviting Wounded Warrior Project today to discuss these important veteran-centric pieces of legislation. While our written testimony expresses our thoughts on many of the bills under consideration, we would like to take time today to highlight 3 particular bills of importance to Wounded Warrior Project. They are the Supporting Veterans of the Fallen Act, the VA Peer Support Enhancement for MST Survivors Act, and the Mark O'Brien VA Clothing Allowance Improvement Act. First, the Sgli and Vgli life insurance program offers payment upon death of a service member or veteran. These payments are currently capped at $400,000. Surviving families typically use these funds to help with unexpected costs associated with the loss of their loved one, to include mortgage payments, burial costs, flights, and outstanding medical bills. Unfortunately, the covered amount of $400,000 has not been updated since 2005. Due to rising inflation over the past 16 years, the value of $400,000 in 2005 would be greater than $560,000 today. The Supporting Families of the Fallen Act would increase the maximum amount of coverage to $500,000 to reflect inflation. This updated life insurance policy would help improve military and veteran families with greater financial security and peace of mind. Wounded Warrior Project supports this legislation and is grateful for Representative Chip Roy's efforts to enhance this fundamental element of VA care. Wounded Warrior Project is also very pleased to see the subcommittee taking a proactive approach in how VA operates the disability and compensation process related to veterans who are suffering from disabilities resulting from military sexual trauma. In recent years, VHA has made significant strides in providing care for survivors of MST. VBA, however, remains the entry point for many seeking care, and like VHA, they can make improvements on how to best approach, speak with, and support veterans suffering from MST. HR 2724, the VA Peer Support Enhancement for MST Survivors Act, seeks to better integrate emotional support into the benefit process by establishing a peer support specialist program specific to MST claims. This is a role already well established within VHA and designed to help veterans through their recovery from mental illness or substance abuse by employing their own lived experience and peer level connection. Wounded Warrior Project appreciates the flexibility that this bill would allow for VBA to craft and implement its own version of this program, and we offer a few suggestions in our written testimony as to how an effective peer support specialist might operate. We thank Representative Delgado for championing this issue. I would like to finish our oral remarks discussing a piece of legislation monetizing an important benefit many of the Warriors Wounded Warrior Project represents utilize, HR 4772, the Mark O'Brien VA Clothing Allowance Improvement Act. This bill aims to fix a significant bureaucratic barrier that exists at VA and hinders veterans with severe physical injuries in obtaining VA benefits they are rightfully owed. Veterans who use prosthetic devices, wheelchairs, or skin ointments for burns often have clothing that is damaged from these ointments and devices. The need to frequently replace clothing that would have otherwise remained serviceable can create a significant financial burden for these veterans. To offset the cost of clothing, VA offers eligible veterans a yearly reimbursement amount of $841. Unfortunately, this benefit is not issued automatically to qualifying veterans. Even those with disabilities that do not change, such as amputations and permanent paralysis, must reapply each year. As a consequence of this bureaucratic requirement associated with this benefit, many veterans are either unable or choose not to take advantage of it at all. Some lack an understanding of the process, while others find the process so inconvenient they forego applying altogether. Mark O'Brien, for whom the bill is named, was a corporal in the United States Marine Corps who suffered an amputation and other serious injuries while in service. He states, having to apply for a clothing allowance each year seems very ineffective, especially for those of us with traumatic brain injuries who often forget to apply. Due to Mark O'Brien's TBI, remembering to file a VA form each year is not only burdensome, but also insensitive to the fact that his amputation is a permanent, lifelong injury. If enacted, HR 4772 would solve this problem by directing VA to establish a process to allow the clothing allowance to be distributed on an automatically reoccurring annual basis. Wounded Warrior Project strongly supports HR 4772 and thanks Representative Barry Moore and Mike Levin for introducing this important bill. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fraunenberger, for your comments and for the work that you do through the Wounded Warrior Project, and also to all of our witnesses for their statements. I will now shift to questions for our witnesses, and I would like to start with Ms. McCoy. As I know that you're a strong advocate for survivors, and you mentioned in your testimony that you yourself are a survivor. I was wondering if you could share with our subcommittee some of the things you've learned from veterans or your own experience as well about the process for filing for an MST-related disability claim and why it's essential that we ensure that this process is done in both an empathetic and a trauma-informed manner.
Thank you, Chairwoman. It is utterly important. There are so many outreach opportunities that are missed because of past, challenges that women have experienced with the claims process. Much of the time, going to the VA and the interconnecting of the VBA, getting your records, are trying to coordinate, appointments and all of those things in a timely fashion to meet the requirements of the claim process, and then connecting with the appropriate person who is trauma informed and has an appropriate discussion with you about your claim. All of those things are multi-layered. And for someone, myself included, with the TBI and then other traumas and then physical challenges, navigating all that can be can make a person not even want to go into the process. Many of the women start the process like I did, and then years later, try again, and then years later, try again. And if they don't have a opportunity to meet with community support that is sensitive to language and dehumanizing kind of ideas that sometimes are perpetuated from within the military, like, you know, your gender, your color, your race, all of those things impact that process. So we have to make sure that we are using the appropriate language across a spectrum of people. It can't just be that we all are veteran, we all bleed green, and that's, you know, suck it up buttercup kind of conversations. And these are still conversations that happen in our community in various spaces as they relate to filing a claim and interacting with, like I said, the multi-layered process of getting the claim processed.
Thank you. And, you know, several times during the hearing today, the discussion of peer support has been addressed. And I do appreciate both the comments from the VA, as well as I know Mr. Fraunenberger mentioned it from Wounded Warrior Project, that, you know, perhaps there are already peer support networks that could be leveraged for this. There could be duplication. There could, you know, I think one of our concerns was the crossover between maybe that exists currently in VHA, but not in VBA, and that those resources could be made available throughout the process in a meaningful way. So I think that is something that we can, you know, continue to look at and understand the way to best provide peer support to our veterans. But just, you know, wanted to follow up with a question to you or any of the others on the topic of military sexual trauma, MST, or just in general, what you've learned from veterans about the benefit of peer support, you know, when dealing with either their claims process or any, you know, stage of their treatment or interaction with the VA. I don't know, Ms. McCoy, if you'd like to go first, if anyone else would like to comment.
Peer support is fundamentally important. Most of the interactions that we have are peer support initiated. And so they're centered around women who have had an experience, whatever that experience is, being the subject matter experts in that space and supporting women through that process. And so when I came into the community in 2008, most of the communities were disjointed. And so we used peer support through a Facebook page, actually, to bring knowledge and information to the women to how to process a claim, how to get through the VA, all of those things. And the improvements that we see of women rebounding and sticking with the process further through it and making sure that they have their paperwork and everything in place before they physically go, and then having someone or a group of people who are there to support them either electronically or in person is, again, fundamentally important. Much of the work that we have done has been leveraging peer support and interconnecting communities through electronically for, you know, information and resources, and making sure that people feel safe, welcomed, and honored in the process. And so even if they have a negative experience at the VA, they can have a safe space to come back to and talk about those challenges.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted to clarify, I mean, this sounds like it's very much an informal, grassroots, ground up network of veterans who have connected and are supporting each other. Is that correct?
Yeah, initially it was a very grassroots, and it has progressed to something that I could have never have dreamed of, but it's been an amazing journey. It's been healing for myself as well as a survivor, because even though I am the CEO, many times the experiences that I have had echo in the community. And so when they hear things that I speak about, they can say, yes, I experienced that. I never had the language to express that. Thank you for giving me a voice and giving me language. And so I think that's why I stay so heavily on the focus of languaging, how we speak about things and how we, you know, carry on with regard to our conversation about military sexual trauma survivors.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I know Ranking Member Nels, if you'll indulge, I know I'm already a minute over the time, but I don't know if any of our other VSOs would like to comment about the value of peer support relative to either military sexual trauma or just in general with the work that you do in your organization.
Chairwoman Lauria, we would like to point out one thing. In a recent survey that we did with a lot of our alumni, we found out that individuals suffering from MST had a higher rate of loneliness. So having that peer support specialist, being able to reach out to them during this process, being able to call them or have someone to call is critical in making sure that they're not re-traumatized, they have the appropriate support needed. So we really do appreciate this piece of legislation and all that you and this committee is doing on behalf of veterans on this topic.
Thank you. Mr. Villanueva. Yep.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yes, DAV, as a matter of fact, just in May testified before the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee that there has been a significant lack really for MST survivors when it comes to putting in claims, and that what this peer support would do, if only just being someone who said, hey, I've walked in your shoes or in your boots in this matter, and we understand exactly what you're going through, and here these are the processes, right? These are the programs that are available to you. These are the groups, these are the expectations to have. No other bureaucrat or middle person can help convey to the veteran, like a peer, someone who's done it themselves, of what to expect. And we think that would be an invaluable tool.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Villanueva, and I see Mr. Titus unmuted.
Yes, I'll
Would you
just
like to
add,
comment?
MOA also supports this, Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity. I think having a champion to help you through the process is so vital, given that for many, the first experience with VA is offering that through the disability claim process. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And to Ranking Member Nels, I recognize I've gone well beyond the 5 minutes that I originally recognized myself for. So I definitely recognize you for 10 minutes or whatever you need
Sure,
to get.
Lauria, no problem. Great questions. Hey, listen, I think Mr. Frontenberger, you answered the second panel. I asked a question regarding this increase in this Sgli and Vgli, and I think your organization supports it. How about the other three? You all support the idea of the increase with these benefits for Sgli and Vgli? You want to pipe in at all?
Yep. MOA probably supports this. Ranking Member Nels.
And Women Veterans Social Justice Network supports as well.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Frontenberger, what suggestions does the WWP have to improve the Wingman Act? That's Scott Perry's bill, the HR 2800.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that question. As you know, Woodward Project supports the intent, but we do have a few recommendations. As we were looking at the legislation, we saw that having individuals on the Hill making determinations and recommendations to veterans without being appropriately trained in the process of the VBA setup, could add a little bit more confusion than needed. So we have a team here that actually helps veterans file for disability claims, and we have to take a test with VA online. It's not very long, but we would recommend starting there for individuals hoping to read the information that's submitted by VA back to your staff and being able to convey that information appropriately to the veteran. A good example is if the piece of paper says, hey, you have a certain amount of time from the date that you've submitted your claim to file an appeal, or that when you received a decision to file an appeal, being able to appropriately advise that veteran what that means. So, again, we support the intent. We think that it's critical for representatives and their staff to have access to this information if they're supporting their constituency. We just want to make sure they have the appropriate training and background to convey the information to the veteran.
Thank you so much. Madam Chairwoman, I yield back. Go ahead.
Thank you. And Mr. Elsie, would you like to ask questions of any of our witnesses from the Bsos?
No, just more of a comment of thank you for your service, and thank you for being willing to testify. These are heartfelt issues that that affect certainly the three of us, the three members who are sitting here today. So you've honored us by coming and providing your expertise. And you know, if you've seen a lot of heads nodding, it's brothers and sisters looking out for one another. And I'm grateful that you all stepped up and expressed your opinions and your support for a lot of great legislation today. So thank you for your attendance. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. I was pausing for a moment because the bells from the House floor were going off for a second. I would like to thank Mr. Villanueva, Mr. Titus, Ms. McCoy, as Mr. Frauenberger again for your participation in today's legislative hearing. Your testimony, your comments, they've been enlightening and also very heartfelt. Thank you for sharing both your personal stories and stories of the members of your VSOs. That definitely helps us understand the impact that these pieces of legislation have on real veterans. And just thank you for continuing to serve those veterans throughout our communities. And we will consider your testimony heavily when we look at these bills and forwarding and moving them forward and also how to improve them. So thank you again. Now as we come to near the end of the hearing, and I would like to make a few brief remarks, but I'd also like to ask Ranking Member Nels whether you'd like to say anything before we close the hearing.
I would like to, of course, thank all our witnesses for being here this morning. I look forward to working with my colleagues on their proposals to support women veterans, survivors of military sexual trauma, and the families of veterans who have passed. I would also like to ask unanimous consent that DOD's 1973 and 1999 decisions regarding whether U.S. Cadet Nurse Corps operations constituted active military duty service be entered into the hearing record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And with that, I yield back.
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Nels. I'd like to thank the witnesses for their testimonies they gave today, as well as the time they spent preparing for today's hearing. We'll definitely take your feedback into consideration as we produce legislation that we hope will be effective, empathetic, and also upholds our responsibility to care for those who served our nation as well as for their families. As we know, losing a loved one to service in this country or as a result of that service has long-lasting impacts on those left behind. And if there's anything we can agree on, it's the fact that these families have made the ultimate sacrifice, and our duty is to ensure that they're afforded a strong suite of a range of benefits and services that will make life easier for the survivors of those veterans going forward. When a veteran through injury or illness has been determined to be incapable of handling their finances and is assigned a fiduciary, the VA should do everything in their power to protect those vulnerable veterans from those who could take advantage of the situation. And finally, a topic that we can consider as well today, when someone has survived military sexual trauma, MST, and has the courage to come forward and file for disability claim based on that trauma, it's imperative that the Department of Veterans Affairs treats that veteran with dignity and respect. These bills we've heard testimony on today all seek to improve the delivery and access to service and benefits for those who served our country as well as their loved ones. And we thank all of the members, both on the committee and our other colleagues in Congress, for bringing forward these important pieces of legislation, and look forward to working with my colleagues on the committee to move this legislation forward. Finally, I want to thank our witnesses, both from the VA as well as from veteran service organizations, for joining us today and providing great insight into the legislative process. Without objection, that includes today's hearing. All members are advised that they have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. This hearing is now adjourned.